The topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization Show, the home of Googlization Nation, where we talk with HR and business thought leaders about the crazy shift going on in the world of business, technology, and HR. Here's your host, Ira Wolf, and co-host Keith Campagna.
Hey, hello, everyone. Came back on, so I picked off for a second there. Hey, welcome back to another Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization show. We're here to talk about the presidential debate. So, not really. I think everybody's had enough of that. We're exhausted from listening last night. Sure, other people are, regardless of which side of the political parties you're on or how you were listening. But we're here today to talk about what we're always talking about, Googlization, geeks and geezers. We're talking about the convergence of technology and people and change and demographics and all those sorts of things. And we've got a great guest today. Really excited about this. The talent war was first recognized in 1992, I think. McKinsey came out and they called there was going to be a talent war. Here we are almost 30 years later. We're still talking about a talent war. And today's guests have a new book coming out about the talent war. So we're going to be talking to Mike Sorelli and George Randall. Great backgrounds. Mike was a former Navy SEAL officer, and George was a U.S. Army officer. And they are now operating in the talent acquisition and recruitment space, which is one of our sweet spots there, Keith. And it's just incredible. And I know, you were a mere child at the time, adolescent probably, 1992, when they start talking about the talent war. And then, I started to talk about the perfect labor storm in the late 90s, and then wrote the book, and almost 20 years ago, hard to believe, talking about how tough it was and how much worse, I can't say worse, much more challenging and difficult it was going to be to hire the right people, find skilled talent, what the shortages were going to be. And there were a lot of moving parts, everywhere from women being a more integral part in the workplace, women actually, we talk about the need for more job skills and more education, and men were dropping out of the workforce, and women were getting their doctorates and graduate degrees in colleges. And, at one time where, if you had one or two token women, forget about color, but one or two token women in a professional class, whether it's physicians, dentists, accountants, attorneys, it was a rare exception. And now they make up 60, sometimes 70% of everybody. So just many different factors that are going on. And so really excited today that we've got Mike and George will be joining us talking about the talent war and what some of the hiring mistakes that they're seeing, and work with a lot of military too. So excited to talk about how we can get more of our military, that expertise, more of the military, our veterans back in the workplace as well. So a lot of topics there. What's going on?
I think honestly, this is greatly timed, because we talked a lot about the war on talent pre-COVID. Then the fit hit the shan, or the shift hit the plan, so to speak, as it relates to what people can do with talent, and everybody just hunkered down or it seemed like people hunkered down. We'll learn more about that from Nate and George in a little bit. But as we start to open up a little bit, at least here in the U.S., I wonder how this talent acquisition challenge is going to play out, because, if you've been listening to the show for a while, you know that I tie in the talent acquisition reality Two, life work integration, which is to say that the days of pretending that the way a person works is separated from the way they live their life are gone. COVID, expedited that for us in terms of that message. So I'm curious to find out how it is that companies not only are addressing their talent needs, not only are they addressing their leadership needs, but how are they addressing the idea that now, according to McKinsey, 60% of the workforce is not going back into a workforce environment. So how does that tie into all of this? I'm thrilled to have these guys on the show.
Yeah, and I'll throw one other kinker in there. Yesterday, I did a webinar with Scott McKenzie. He's another Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization alumni, and we were talking about e-learning and micro-learning, and obviously that took a huge jump start with COVID. And in doing some research for that, came up with a statistic and blew me away. I don't think the statistic itself will shock you, except I wonder what it will be now, and then how the pandemic actually accelerated this, which leads back into the talent acquisition of who were, I keep saying that the skill shortage did not go away. It got worse because now overnight everybody needed additional skills, even if it was simple as digital skills. But now we need to learn how to work from home. We need, and if you're, even if you are part of your workforce is working from home and you're a manager, now you need to learn how to manage people who are working from home. You can't see what they're doing. And so now managers need to learn how to work differently, and people working from home need to learn how to work differently. And then the complexity of our jobs, not only where we work got more difficult, but the challenge, our problem solving and communication and all that sort of stuff. But this statistic just blew me away that by 2022, I'll give you the statistic, then I'll tell you when it was given. By 2022, 42% of core skills required to perform existing jobs are expected to change. So 4 out of 10 of our core skills, collaboration, communication, project management, decision-making, critical thinking, emotional intelligence, all those things that they lump into, here's the core skills that we need. 4 out of 10 of those is going to change. The thing that was most striking with that is that was published in January of 2020, before all this.
From China?
I mean, before all this. So, they were saying even before the pandemic hit that 4 out of 10, 42% of all our core skills need to be changed. Now, that didn't mean we wouldn't need them, but they were going to be changed. So they needed to be upskilled, reskilled, and people who didn't need them before were going to need some of these skills. And, then we have the pandemic, and, so it throws everything. So certainly recruitment and talent acquisition is going to be challenging. And right before we were on the air, we were asking how things were going for them. And they said I'll let them describe it, but where they expected talent acquisition recruitment to basically fade from everybody's radar, like it did in 9/11 and 2008, they were busier than ever. And we say it over and over again. Second quarter of this year, we're now almost the last day of the third quarter, which will also be very good. But second quarter, which I expected to completely just stop. Nobody would hire, nobody would promote. We wouldn't be doing any testing, nothing, because everybody was going to go in freeze mode. We were up over 50%. And part of that was last year's second quarter was a little iffy. Over a year was good, but the second quarter was a little iffy. But even so, the fact that I would have been thrilled if I kept pace, if we would have had this, we would have been talking about this in March. So without further ado, I want to basically bring on the authors of a brand new book, The Talent War. And we're going to be talking about how great organizations can avoid 3 critical hiring mistakes. And one of my questions to them, and this isn't facetious, but how did they narrow it down to just 3? It's an endless list. So George and Mike, welcome to Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization.
Hey, thank you very much. Appreciate being on. It's an honor.
Likewise.
Yeah. Oh, it's very mutual. And again, appreciate you guys for the service you've done and for the service you're doing now. Yes, for HR, for companies, and for our veterans. Really appreciate it. So let's start. Why don't you do a quick intro for, on each of you, a short bio, and then we'll kind of dive into the show and figure out, how this Talent War book, came to be.
Age before beauty. Kick it off, George.
I so regret teaching him that line. I really, really do. It's come back to haunt me. Kind of the short version is enlisted to pay my way through school, eventually moved on to becoming an officer, really got the leadership bug in me. Did a number of great leadership positions, started out in Berlin, which kind of gives my age when the wall was up, a number of deployments to Africa and other places, but eventually made the jump to corporate America and semi-accidentally got into resource management and HR. And found that I just had this overwhelming passion for talent and teams, and have been able to make a really good career, a little more than 20 years out of being in the human capital space.
Yeah, amazing. By the way, I do remember the Berlin Wall. I do remember it coming down.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
We were actually on
now talking about VUCA, because when the Berlin Wall came down is when the military decided to talk about VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, which is I can't think of a better acronym that aligns with 2020.
Exactly.
Absolutely. We actually talked about it in the book. One of the original members of Delta Force was a big interviewee for the book by the name of General Boykin, and he's just fascinated with the VUCA environment and finding the right personalities that can operate in a calm, effective manner in those environments, and that's tough to do.
Talk about trying to find some good talent.
Very hard. And much like George, Ira, to your question, born and raised in Silicon Valley, did something very uncharacteristic of most of the young men and women in my town. I enlisted in the Marine Corps. You talk about representing an organization. I met a Force Recon Marine, which back in the 80s, 90s was their version of special operations. And I was fascinated by the individual. Humbly confident, articulate, respectful to everyone, and humble to boot. And so I said, I want to be part of that organization. The Marine Corps is a business case example in recruiting. Joined it, made it into the recon community, became a scout sniper, and then met some Navy SEALs. And I'm like, that's my next challenge. Joined the SEAL teams, and then made it to a certain level within the special operations community known as Tier 1, 10 combat deployments, and fascinated looking back at my time, what made certain teams high-performing teams, and why did others fail? And that's where George and I are not only partners, we're brothers. We are just passionate about this subject, and we get it wrong as much as we get it right.
How did you guys get together? Because obviously you had different career paths. One being younger or older than the other.
I know we look the same age. I assure you, George is older. In fact, when he talks about Berlin, people look at him and they're like, "Oh, that must have been a beautiful tour." I'm like, it was during the Cold War. We got to remind them. So the power of LinkedIn. Yeah. I'm with a group called Echelon Front. Echelon Front was started by the two co-authors of Extreme Ownership. If you've heard of that book, it's a New York Times bestseller, Jocko Willink and Leif Babin. And George reached out to me over LinkedIn and said, "Hey, I see you're in Austin too. I'm in talent acquisition, would love to sit down." So we met for breakfast, became best friends, to the point where he actually married my wife and I. He stood in as the pastor, had the crowd literally in tears from laughter. And then eventually we're like, "Hey, let's do this. Let's start a company alongside Jocko and Leif." And that's how EF Overwatch, our specialized executive search firm, started.
Wonderful. I can ask you where the EF came from. The other EF doesn't exist anymore, which is EF Hutton, right?
Yeah. So Echelon Front. So we're the talent acquisition arm. Echelon Front under Jocko and Leif is a leadership consultancy. So naturally, the question we get when we work with these companies is, okay, where do we find like 10 of you? And at the time, we didn't have a good answer. And I said, "Hey, I can do this."
Cool. So you had a great story, and I guess this was when you, I assume it's when you came out of the military and you went into corporate America, and you basically you were recruited and interviewed by a big box retailer.
That will go unnamed, yes.
So, and many of them don't exist anymore, right?
Yeah. This one, I assure you, still does.
Okay.
That leap from, the military, you don't know what you don't know. But there's a part of you that believes you're confident that the leadership skills and the skills that you learned in the military, which, Mike and I refer to as the world's greatest leadership incubator, the U.S. military, I thought I would transfer those over. And they do transfer over. But the way that they recruited me in the job that they put me into couldn't have been more of a mismatch. And I don't think they knew what they were looking for. I thought I knew what I was looking for. And while I excelled there, they weren't looking for talent. They weren't looking for leaders. Really, they were looking for cogs in a wheel, big box retailer. And that's not what people in the military are. They're not cogs in a wheel. They're part of a bigger mission. Everything's critical. Everything's essential. It's, person in the team fails, the mission fails. And so it just wasn't a good fit. So, took the opportunity to move on into something else.
So, I mean, I guess one of the questions is, and I assume that's where some of the origin of the hiring mistakes, and I know you've identified 3, as I said. I don't know how you narrowed it down to 3, but just 3. But what was there something there that when you look back upon, what could they or what could you have done differently to recognize that it wasn't a good fit?
I think for me, when you're transitioning, when you're a veteran and you don't know what you don't know, sometimes you have the tendency to see things for what you want them to be versus what they are. So, when I coach veterans and Mike coaches veterans, we make sure that people are looking at it realistically and asking the right questions. When you interview, the questions just aren't an expression of your interest in that company. They're designed to help you frame to make sure that fit is right for you and right for them. So I didn't know what questions to ask. I didn't know necessarily what to dig into. And they had this preconceived job description with, objective requirements that weren't necessarily really thought out. And it was like, matching playing cards. Okay, I've got a heart here. I've got a heart here, a club and a club. They match. Let's move forward. So, we talk about it is hard to narrow down the mistakes, but, the number one mistake, first and foremost, that Mike and I talk about is companies lack a talent mindset, which is the deep core belief that your human capital is your only differentiator that will allow you to maintain a competitive advantage over time. And then, beyond that, there were a number of mistakes that we had to narrow down, but after you have a talent mindset, you got to really back up and say, what are we planning to do? What is our strategic plan here? People just go into it and turn the cranks and it's a machine. Objective requirements, number of years of experience. We'll put out a job description. We'll interview candidates. We go through the machinations and we get a butt in the seat. And Mike and I have seen that so many times over the course of our career. And it's, even if you have a talent mindset, if you still don't have a strategic plan and know what success looks like, you're going to fail time and time again.
I don't even know where to begin, but I'm going to try to make a stab at it. Ira and I talk all the time about the lack of leadership as it relates to prioritizing human capital. We had a guest of ours, Dave Bookbinder, who wrote the new ROI, Return on Individual. He talks about how, I'm going to mess it up, but he says, to make a successful company go, you have to have financial capital, you have to have some other capital, but you have to have human capital first. And if you don't, something like that. Sorry, Dave. What's it like when you go into an organization and you realize they don't have number 1 or number 2? Is it a board of directors conversation? Is a management conversation? Where do you start to chisel away at this? Because guys, this is it. This is, as far as I can tell, in my humble opinion, this is the way that a company can move from, the worst to first in any category. Where do you start?
So, Keith, you hit it. Talent acquisition, let's just say human capital management across the board is a subset of leadership. And it's a very critical component of leadership, but it's one we rarely talk about. How many MBA programs have a focus on human capital? They don't consider it a core business skill. And so this is why we give leaders sort of a pass. They're like, hey, you know what? I've been missing this. We get people reaching out on LinkedIn every day. Like, I haven't even thought about this. And we're like, it's okay. Because you're so concerned with driving revenue or R&D to make your product better that you miss the most important sort of driver behind all of those, your people. Your people are the hidden line on the balance sheet, yet they're the most important. They're your largest overhead expense. So with the talent war, when George and I were having these conversations over breakfast and lunch, and we eventually committed to writing a book, but how are we going to do it different? And, you know, with our backgrounds in the military, one organization in the United States does it better than almost anyone. And that is the special operations community, which I think Ira and you would admit there's a fascination with our U.S. special operations. Agile, effective, efficient, innovative, and they dominate their space. And really, SOCOM, U.S. Special Operations Command, had to develop this innate talent mindset based really off three principles. One, there is no one with special operations industry experience. If we went to a high school and said, hey guys, we need people with 5 years of special operations experience, no one would raise their hands. So by nature, we had to become very good at identifying raw talent based off two things. One, character, or what we can call attributes, and two, mindset. If we know an individual has those two things, we can train them to all the hard skills that are necessary. And it's a very, very complex job. Two, special operations wins as teams, not individuals. Rambo, that's a great Hollywood movie that does not exist in our line of work. It is teams that dominate their competition. If there are Rambos, I definitely was not one, though I served with some guys that were pretty darn close. When you look at those things, that is what American businesses are missing. It is that one, they usually look at the objective rather than the subjective, which is focusing in on character and mindsets. And Keith, you bring up COVID, and Ira brings up VUCA. On the leadership consultancy side, with what we've seen when COVID hit, is a lot of our clients, and we focus predominantly on small to mid-sized businesses, they were losing their minds. Their people could not deal with the chaos and the volatility, ambiguity, the chaos, the uncertainty. And so really what it highlighted is that they weren't assessing and selecting the people capable of dealing with that environment into their organization. And when it hit, they realized that they had made a big miss in building a team capable of performing in any environment. And so that's why we focused on U.S. Special Operations as a business case example for companies to emulate.
Yeah.
For sure. Hey, we're going to be coming up on a break here just in a little bit, but we've been talking with Mike Sorelli and George Randall about their new book, The Talent War. Great, what lessons learned from the military, putting it into business. As you were talking, Mike, we did a webcast a few weeks ago. I did a webcast a few weeks ago with Dr. Solange Shira. She's a data scientist. She calls herself a data wonk. She was actually a CHRO for a couple companies, trying to get them to look at the data. Her focus has become diverse. Well, two things. One is and it was interesting that we were all talking about the lack of ROI or measurement of human capital management and the critical role that human capital plays. And like many other people who have been able to document this, there is a direct line to the bottom line. And ROI. And again, many people have done this, but I know her personally, and she has done just amazing work to link, everything, whether it's attrition or retention or engagement, to profitability, productivity, performance. It's nothing new. It just drives me. It's like crazy. Why don't people adopt this? Why don't people get it? And there was, and I just literally submitted an article on it about her work of that interview and how it relates to DEI, diversity, and equity and inclusion, especially the equity part. And I can't remember if this was a McKinsey or somebody. It was a significant group that only 7% of companies have KPIs for human capital. 7%.
Yeah, and you know what's interesting? That's another, and you know, we cover a lot of mistakes in the book, but one of the absolute critical things is most CHROs aren't looked at as strategic partners, and you know, so the work that she does is rather unique, and we all look at it and say, well, it makes perfect sense. Why aren't we doing that? But on the whole, they're not. And yeah, we have this great story. One of my mentors and coaches, and you probably know her, Tracy Keogh, who is the CHRO of HP. Remember, she had this great quip, and I will forever remember it, which is, you know, she was invited into an executive meeting, and somebody looked at her and said, "Hey, Tracy, we're glad you're at the table." And Tracy just shot back immediately, said, "We are the table." and it starts from there. But when your CHRO isn't strategic, you know, you're never going to get to those KPIs. You're never going to get to the linkage between your hiring and your performance and your revenue and your product development and your client service metrics, you know, your net promoter scores. You can indeed, she's absolutely right. You can connect all of that stuff, but you can't connect it when your CHRO is looked at as compliance or operational or administrative. And that's where it starts, to Mike's point, the top of the leadership chain.
Yeah.
And the CHRO is tied to the CEO, and they have that talent mindset. And from there, great things can happen.
Yeah. And Mike, I know you have something you want to respond to, but we're going to do it right after the break. You are listening to the Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization Show. We've got Mike Sorelli and George Randall, co-authors of the new book, The Talent War, and can't wait to get back and continue on this. You're going to hear from our two sponsors, Zor.ai and Success Performance Solutions. We'll be back in less than 2 minutes. Hiring top talent shouldn't be left up to the roll of the dice. And yet, that's exactly what many organizations do. They roll the dice, cross their fingers, and pray for a better outcome. Hiring the right employees the first time is much too important and way too costly to leave to a game of chance. Your employees and your customers deserve better. For 25 years, Success Performance Solution has been helping small and medium-sized businesses hire smarter. They offer pre-employment and leadership assessments from typing and data entry to C-suite competence. Whether it's production, sales, healthcare, call centers, or management, Success Performance Solutions can help. Visit their website at www.successperformancesolutions.com to schedule a free demo or call 800-803-4303.
Imagine how your company would grow if your candidate experience earned a 99% approval rating. Well, to get to 99%, you need the three best letters in recruitment technology, XOR. Zor's text bots, chat bots, and audio bots increased IKEA's candidate conversion rate 455%. Zor decreases candidate drop-off rates, improves your candidate experience, and collects analytics for future strategies. To learn more, check out Zor.ai. That's XOR.ai.
Hey, welcome back, everyone, to the second segment of our Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization Show. I'm your host, Ira Wolf, here with Keith Compagna, my co-host, and our guests today are Mike Sorelli and George Randall, authors of the new book, The Talent War. Mike, when we left off, we were talking about the kind of the measurement or lack of KPIs and measurement of human capital, and how it's well proven. There's substantial, significant science behind this evidence that human capital is linked to bottom line performance, and yet we can't get beyond that. So
it's one, again, that George and I talked about a lot, and what we came to the conclusion was, because the special operations community, going back to them, has 4 axioms, what they call actually 5 special operations truths. And each of those truths revolves around people. They get it. Technology is great, but technology will fail. What you can't have fail within your organization is people. So again, a lot of us end up in a linear train of thought as leaders in an organization because we're dealing with so much. I don't envy CEOs whatsoever. It's one of the hardest jobs in the world. But what we tend to do with that traditional linear train of thought is classify HR, as George hit it, as either a overhead or compliance initiative. And we also view it as a non-revenue generating function. Okay, that's a direct way to look at it. But if you can view things indirectly, it's actually your largest revenue generating function. And to your point, now you're saying we can trace it back to the bottom line, how important this is. It is the function that feeds each of your traditional revenue generating functions with the talent to drive results. And when a CEO can sort of come to that epiphany, or the senior leaders, and understand that, they start to develop this talent mindset. And that's really the paradigm shift that a lot of leaders have to make. And that's hard, again, when you're focused on so many things. If you're a public company, you've got board of directors and shareholders, looking down your back about driving revenues, you tend to put talent and human capital management as a lesser priority.
So Ira knows I'm chomping at the bit here.
Now I can see him do it.
Guys, I love this. Thank you so much for coming on the show. This is the quality stuff. And my question to you, Mike, is what is it about the talent war, or maybe your approach as consultants, that gets CEOs to actually come out of the funk? Because what I believe lies behind what you just said is that the CEOs don't know any better. They've gone through college, got their MBAs, drive revenue, screw the employees. We've got extra ones we could just hire. Turns out we don't have those extra employees anymore. Turns out none of them have any skill sets. So now, as I view the value of a CEO, it's growing because they have to be human focused. But fact check me here, throw me your opinion. 96% of them aren't human focused. So how do you guys get in there to really kind of snap the mold into place so that they can be human capital focused?
George, I'll take the first snap at this. We really, we don't do direct sales. We're not seeking out companies to bring our services to them. We wait. Yeah. We wait for those CEOs that maybe read the book or see us on the podcast or doing the LinkedIn, and they say, hey, you know what? You make great points. I just never even considered it. Can you help? When somebody has the humility to say, hey, I've built a $40 million top line company, but you know what? We've never thought of talent this way. Can you help push us to the 80 million mark? Those are the people we want to work with that have that humility to say that. So it's the same thing with people that come to, that need help with seeking talent for the talent acquisition arm. One of the core fundamentals that we need to hear from leaders is that leadership is more important than industry experience. If we do not hear that from the client, we will not take them on as a client. That is pivotal to us. And it goes back to the heart of the talent war about the 9 foundational attributes and how special operations has built one of the most respected organizations in the world.
Keith, it is hard to change those mindsets. But, one of the things that we demonstrated in the book, and that is your products, the speed of the economy, the speed of markets, the speed of bringing a product to market or a service to market is blindingly fast. You can be outdated very, very quickly, and in any industry. It's your people that are the competitive advantage. Right. And when you get the people wrong, you get the Enrons, you get the Blockbusters. I mean, how many companies could we go through when you got the talent wrong, don't exist, or took huge hits, and are struggling? And those people that are placing talent first, and Mike and I will provide plenty of examples to them, those are the ones that are succeeding, thriving, and winning. And so it is hard to change those mindsets, but, it's your only competitive advantage. And if we can get them to believe, like Mike said, leadership is everything, it's the solution to every problem, and number 2, that people are your most competitive advantage, we can go to work from there and help out.
One thing I have for Ira and Keith, and we're interested in this because George and I talk about this, is that, maybe we're to the point to help awaken a lot of this 96% that you're talking about, Keith, is that HR needs to be rebranded. HR sort of has this compliance feel to it. And I know some people dislike it. It is people operations. And that operation is one of the hardest operations to run because people by nature are very unique. Sometimes they're very crazy. Somebody that can become good both at the talent acquisition piece and the talent management piece is truly a master in people operations. That we think maybe that would assist with the push. And then for a lot of leaders that we work with too, it's that, don't mean to be critical, is that we look at whoever, their HR director, and just the person is not what we would define as an A player. If you don't have an aggressive, intelligent leader in charge of your HR, you're behind the power curve. You need somebody that has a curiosity to learn every facet of the business, of what sales needs, of what marketing needs, what finance needs. They have to be a student of the business and almost know it, which makes their job harder, because the sales director just needs to know about sales. But an HR or a chief people officer needs to know about every facet of the business.
Well, it's interesting you say that real quick, because I don't want to keep you guys from talking, but I was in an event about a year ago, and really good speaker, leadership, local out of the Philadelphia area. And they posed the question to a room full, maybe 50, 60 HR practitioners about being a part of the business conversations. And I couldn't help myself. Once it got to the Q&A section, I raised my hand. I said, just if you could raise your hand if you know what your key business drivers are.
Oh, yeah.
Two people raised their hand. And, and you mentioned the sales leaders, Mike. I'm not so sure that the same percentage of sales leaders know what's going on inside of HR. It's like, if it's going to be a leadership thing, we got to swipe the labels off and talk about people, because the people are in HR, they're in sales, they're in development, they're in every single capacity. Yeah. Meanwhile, nobody knows how to connect the dots.
And Keith, to your point, which was there, which were great examples, the sales manager. I mean, how many times do sales managers do the hiring and don't allow HR to do it?
Oh, God. I could take forever just on that one topic alone. And sales leaders are some of the worst. Oh, I know best.
Right.
And then of course, we get into nepotism.
Yeah, you have to be an extrovert to be able to sell, right? So hey, I want to make sure we cover this, because we did put this out. We had 3 hiring mistakes. We've covered 2 of them. We just didn't identify them as the top 2. The first one that you had identified was there's no talent mindset. We talked about that. The second one was HR does not serve a strategic role. We've been talking about that. What's the third?
Fear-based hiring and butts and seats mentality. When people are more attuned to, the red flags of a hire versus green flags, they're hiring so they don't lose that head count. They think somebody is better than nobody in that seat. And they've got to get somebody in that seat to advance the team, advance the product, advance the service. And they're operating out of fear versus out of, how do I actually get somebody that not only is going to lift our team, an A player, but somebody that's going to be an A player for the problems and the challenges that haven't hit us yet. It's like, what do I need right now? What are those objective experience requirements? 3 years of experience here, 4 years of experience here, this degree, that degree. Okay, they've worked at our competitor. Let's move quickly, butt and seat. We're ready to go. You see it time again, turning the cranks.
And to back George up on this, so fear-based hiring was coined by our one of our co-authors, Dr. Josh Cotton. This is a cool story. Out of his doctorate, IO psychology, industrial organizational psychology, he was hired by the Navy to assess how the Navy SEALs assess and select people into their organization. Again, back to the soft community, we've been evolving our process for over 5 decades. And it's still evolving. This thing called a feedback loop is how we continually ask, hey, is the talent we're pulling in tomorrow the right talent for 5 years, 10 years down the road? So a feedback loop is critical, and we talk about that on the book. So he eventually went into the corporate sector. He's the director of talent assessments for Honeywell now. But he really hones in on the soft community hires based off potential. It's potential-based hiring, because we know we can teach the hard skills if the people have the attributes that we require. So he talks about fear-based hiring, and he really focuses in on this thing, the objective assessments, because for a lot of HR managers that are lazy, they're just going to go right to the objective. It's a person that truly masters this art of people and talent assessment want to look at the subjective and want to identify, is this a person that could survive a COVID scenario and actually prosper and thrive in that type of environment? And a lot of HR people don't do that. I know we place a lot of, we point fingers at the senior leadership of companies, but we also are holding our HR brothers and sisters in arms accountable as well. You've got tougher hurdles to overcome. You actually have to be very aggressive at what you do, improve your value. You have to communicate your value to your senior leaders through your actions. And then the butts and seats, again, it goes back to the soft truths. Quality is better than quantity. And the second you start treating HR or people operations as a taking or order taking service, you're wrong. And that's often how they get treated. And it becomes reactive rather than proactive, building your bench full of talent in anticipation of growth.
And here's where I think the listening audience has to understand. Special Ops was a 50-year project. You know, when I do my keynotes, I bring up the fact that for about 8 or 9 decades, HR has been considered a cost center. This is not something that's going to happen overnight.
Right.
However, there seems to be this rush to actually get change moving along fast. What's the role? We only have a couple minutes here, but maybe if you don't mind me asking you to, how do you see technology being brought in to help? Maybe there's not a lot of A players out there, guys. You know that. So how can B players and maybe C players, what do they need to know about using technology to maybe expedite the time it takes to evolve this message and this mindset, not just the message, but the actual practicality of it?
Well, I think, the use of technology and AI and talent acquisition in HR, and one of the things we talk about in the book is that when you're evaluating and looking for those A players, you're always going to use some kind of multivariate approach. And I think artificial intelligence, I think good assessment tools like Dr. Josh Cotton came up with the Elite Performance Indicator. You have Hogan assessments. You have the Leadership Circle. I think all of those assessments and all of those pieces of technology and the ability to aggregate big data and help you zero in on the success attributes of somebody, I think is absolutely something that we ought to be doing more of. But before you get to the technology piece, if you don't have the basics of blocking and tackling that talent mindset and understanding what is predictive of success, that technology is just going to be another cost expenditure that HR just put on their budget line. Yeah. And it's not going to return what people think it's going to return. You have to have the basics down. And I think, not to go long-winded on the question, but that's where Mike and I, there was so much that we could cover in this space, but the biggest thing was getting the mindset and the character attributes out there that have made, special forces what they are today as the starting point of doing the basics. Go from the basics, crawl, walk, run. The run is the AI and all the technology today, and most people are hardly out of the crawl phase.
Hey, Keith, we are going to use technology to our advantage. I mean, special operations does it in contrast to our enemy during the global war on terror. We had night vision, we had body armor, we had other technologies that we utilized, and of course we use those to our advantage. But I'll push back on you with regards to having B and C players in charge of hiring that are going to use technology.
I knew he would.
It's still the root of the problem. If you're saying, hey, technology will solve this fact, it's not. So you talked about the sales managers being overly involved in the hiring process, not letting their professionals and people, do what they do best. So the special operations community, because we understand a critical part of being a leader is you have to run training or assessment and selection at some point to become a well-rounded leader. And the business world does not do this. Right. If that sales manager wants to be involved in the hiring process, and this is very hard for companies to do, but it will be invaluable to the leadership development of that leader, is you have to take them out of that function selling for 6 months to a year and put them in charge of hiring. And you explain it to them. Hey, you are actually going to have a exponential effect on this company because you understand what's required for the position. Now we need to train you how to assess and select and build teams. And that's what you're going to focus on for 1 year. We do this with special operations. We take our very best off the battlefield. And trust me, they want to be on the battlefield, much like a salesperson wants to be making sales calls. Right. And we say, hey, for the next 2 years, we understand we're taking you away from your team, but this is what's best for the organization. And we need you focused. This is your primary job, is hiring, is assessing talent into the organization. And businesses are pretty bad. I'm making a sweeping organization. I'd love your opinion on that, but I don't think most businesses do a good job of that.
And I'd love to continue that, but I regret this so much that we're running up to the end.
Okay.
What are you guys doing next week?
What I want both of you to do is how can people get in touch with you? Where they're going to be able to get the book, and then if each of you can share one thing. This question was asked to me in a slightly different way on one of my interviews, but with a new book coming out, what's the title of your favorite chapter in your book?
You want to go first,
George.
Mike? It's the chat. We're both going to answer the same thing. We both argued over the last one.
Well, yeah, actually, George, I've never asked you this, but I will say you can't hire or fire your way to success.
I was right. If we were going to say the same thing.
So we end the book with this chapter because we talk about building a world-class talent acquisition process, but then we come back to the fact that it says, hey, we gave you all this good stuff, but actually, before you do that, you actually got to get this leadership component down first.
Right.
Because if you have horrible leadership, but a world-class talent acquisition process, you're going to become a revolving door for talent, because good talent does not put up with bad leadership. And it really, we didn't recognize this until we got to the end of the book, and we're like, hey, you know what? We're missing this main thing. George?
Yeah, it's same chapter for me. And we struggled because there's been so many books written on leadership, but we wanted to close it out. But that was really, really important. A players want to work for A players. A players will not tolerate working for B or C players. So, we love the whole book. I think they're great insights. And you can reach Mike or I. It's either George@EFOverwatch.com, Mike@EFOverwatch.com, or please connect with us on LinkedIn. We're happy to reach out and kind of spread the word. This is our way of kind of giving back. We've been in service for a number of years, but we believe the number one and most powerful thing in the world is the U.S. economy, and we want to continue to make it better.
And it's the thing that feeds the military. For the book, it's still in pre-release. It officially releases on November 10th. If you don't know that date, it's the Marine Corps birthday. Yes, we did that on purpose because I think the Marine Corps is one of the finest organizations in the land. But you can buy it at Amazon or anywhere books are sold.
Congratulations, guys. Thank you so much. This was Ira. I know I don't usually say this because I don't want to hurt the feelings of other guests, but this was bringing it, guys. Your passion, your service. Thank you very much for all of it, and best of luck. I'll be in touch, and hopefully we'll get you back on the show and we'll talk a little bit more. Thank you.
And I want to get very much. Find out what are the traits and skills that we need for VUCA. So we didn't even get there. Which I am going to reach out to you guys, and this is going to be part of my way of closing. We just partnered with a new organization that's done a ton of research on something called the adaptability quotient. And it measures two out of the three things. Well, we talked about all three of them. It measures ability, it measures character, and it measures environment. So it's looking at, are people struggling with being adaptive in this because of the environment, the people they hang with, the company that they work in, or is it due to their character, their attitude, or is it due to their ability? And if we don't, and they identified actually 17 different dimensions that can be measured, just as in all the other assessments that you were talking about and provide. A lot of good research, a lot of good organizations are backing this up. So I'm going to share a link with you guys. We're going to be talking about that in the next 3 weeks from now. Our guests are going to be Mike Raven and Ross Thornley, who are the founders of this organization. So
we'll listen,
guys. So,
thanks again, guys.
Hey, thank you very much. Thank you for everything you're doing. Thanks for your service, and stay safe.
It was an honor. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, appreciate it. And good luck with the book. So we'll be getting the copy. Oh, Keith, that was good. That was super good. I've got like a whole list of questions here as I usually do. We definitely, I just saw there was an interview somebody was on. I think Mike was on. Both of them were on. It's like a 3-hour interview. It was like a go back and forth and go. Yeah. It's long. I can see how we can easily do it with those guys. Final comment.
I think it exposes how much work is ahead of HR. I think it exposes how hard it is for people to actually get out of their own way and start to put into practice. The guys touched on it. These are real things. The way that we go through, most companies go through their job is outdated. It doesn't even apply to today's pace, today's people. And I know I'm curious to see how it all turns out. So great job on getting them on.
Hey, thanks everyone for listening to the Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization Show. I'm your host, Ira Wolf, and I'm here with Keith. And thanks again to Zor.ai and Success Performance Solutions for being our sponsors. If anybody's interested in joining us as a sponsor, please reach out to us. We got a couple spots. Interested in the replay, we're now on YouTube, Facebook, and we're now on Amazon. I can't remember if I mentioned that last week, but we are now on Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, iHeart, SoundCloud,
Right.
you name it. We're there. And I'm going to close this week with two things. One is, this was from Mike. I heard him say this. You will be tested in the future. So, you will be tested. We will all be tested. We are being tested. But until the next episode of the Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization Show, this is Ira Wolf and Keith Compagnon. Don't let the shift hit your plans.